Well, it's the end of the week. Good morning, Friday morning. Glad you joined us here this morning, and thank you for being with me. It's, most of you all week long. I still don't know how many are watching. We're getting somewhere in the range of 65 to 100 views a day. I don't know if that's enough for us to keep doing it, but I appreciate each one of you. And what I'd like for you to do is to continue to comment, give me suggestions on how I can do this a little bit better. I'm very not untechy in the video part of it, so sometimes I'm looking down here, sometimes I'm looking up here at you. So please forgive that. And again, I appreciate your comments, and I really appreciate you sharing what we're doing with others. What we're doing now this week, we've been talking about Joshua and talking about when he walked out on the plains of Jericho. And he was trying to figure out how he was going to defeat Jericho. It looked like an impossible situation for him. And we relate that to some of the things in our life that come up, sometimes of our own making as a result of sin or bad decisions or whatever. Sometimes it just assails us and we have no control over it and no reason for it to be in our life. But there it stands, just like Jericho stood before Joshua, and he tried to figure out how to do it. And we talked about the 5 things that he learned, or we've talked about 4 of the 5 words that he learned a lot about out there on the plains of Jericho. The first one was strength. His strength didn't come from Joshua, it came from the Lord. His strategy. It didn't come from spending so much time with Moses and watching how he worked and figuring out a good strategy for Jericho. No, he learned that the strategy for Jericho, for an impossibility, had to come from the Lord. So how to do it and the strength to do it. And then he learned what he must do, and that was submission. He had to bow down in worship. He had to believe the word of the Lord coming to him about how to do it. And then he had to act in obedience. You know, folks, it's one thing for us to worship the Lord physically. We do that on Monday, Sunday morning at church. We try to quote worship the Lord in spirit and truth. And it's good that we read the word and believe the word. And then along comes James in the New Testament and reminds us when he said, do not be just a hearer of the word, but a doer of the word. That's what Joshua had to learn, to submit, not only in worship, not only in believing, but he had to submit by acting, by doing what the Lord said. And in that, he discovered that he couldn't depend on his own self-sufficiency. There was no way he could bring those walls down. He had to be dependent upon someone who could, and the only one at his disposal was God. And so he learned the word self-sufficiency, the difference between depending on yourself and being assured in yourself that God will work through you. So he learned not to depend on himself, whether it was his strength, his mind, or whatever, but he learned to depend on the sufficiency of God. And that's what we have to learn in dealing with our own Jerichos, our own Goliaths, our own problems, whatever they are, when they jump up. And when we're out on the plains of depression seeking how do we defeat whatever is in our life? How do we get through it? How do we get by it? How do we get on? Go to the Lord, worship him, believe in the word, and then act in obedience and in total dependence on the Lord. Now, when we do those 4 things, then the 5th word becomes obvious. And that was that Joshua discovered what success is. He discovered that he could do the impossible, but only through the strength of the Lord, only through the strategy of the Lord, only in submission to the Lord, and only by renouncing his self-sufficiency. And when he did those things, he discovered success. And the first one was obedience. Now, listen to what happened. He said in chapter 6 and verse 20, when the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout. Now, did you hear all of that? Those were the ridiculous instructions that God gave to Joshua. And he didn't question them, at least outwardly. He turned to all of the people of Israel, all the warriors. He said, here's what we're going to do. And he said, I want you to follow this to the letter. They couldn't understand it, but they, like Joshua, did what Joshua said because they knew Joshua had a word from the Lord. And so in submission, they did that. And it says they gave a loud shout and the wall collapsed. Wow. They didn't do anything but shout and obey God. And when they shouted, it said the wall collapsed. Now listen to this. So everyone charged straight in and they took the city. I like that word, everyone. There were priests there. There were folks carrying the Ark of the Covenant. There were folks blowing trumpets. But it says everybody. The band, the orchestra, the preachers, the priest, everybody was involved in the success that God gave because they were obedient to the instructions God gave. Folks, listen to me. You will always find success in your life when you are obedient to what the Spirit of God says to you. Now, don't miss that. Everyone was dependent on God. Everyone was dependent on His strength. Everyone was dependent on what He said He would do to the walls. Everybody was submissive to the Lord. Everybody renounced their self-sufficiency. And it says, everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. In other words, they had success because of their obedience. But you know something that's really good? The next verse says, they took all of the things and they gathered up everything that they wanted, and they said, this is the Lord's, so therefore it's ours. No, 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 no. All of that is hogwash. That's not what they did. It says they took the city, and listen to the next verse. They devoted the city to the Lord. Did you get that? They thanked the Lord for their success. So they understood obedience comes through success. And they understood that victory over this Jericho comes by obedience. That's the success they enjoyed. And then they dedicated it to the Lord. It says they devoted the city to the Lord, destroyed with a sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. I mean, they devastated the city, but wait a minute. Wasn't there somebody in there they were supposed to rescue? Well, it doesn't matter. They just went in and killed everybody. No, they did not. They were still being obedient to the Lord, and their success was in obedience, not destroying everyone or everything. It says that they were victory and obedient in rescuing Rahab. Listen to it, the next verse. Joshua said to the two men who had spied out the land, go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her in accordance with your oath to her. So the young men who had done the spying went in, brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers, sisters, all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. And then they burned everything, the city and everything in it, but the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab, the prostitute. God's grace, when we're obedient, works through us. So in everything, they were obedient to the Lord, and they established the Lord's power and His presence in the life of Israel. Let me read the last verse in chapter 6. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. And when Joshua's fame spread and the stories were told, God's fame spread. Hey, let us use our successes in life to let the fame of God spread through our lives. Hey, God bless you. Meet your Jerichos with these 5 words, understanding in your heart. Have a great weekend. Go to church somewhere. Bless the Lord. Worship the Lord. Give testimony of the Lord wherever you go. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you right back here on Monday. And we're going to go back into chapter 6 just a moment before we jump in to chapter 7 and see how it's easy to throw success away. God bless you. You have a great day here on this Friday and through the weekend. We'll see you Monday. Bless you.